Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Today we have another one of our timely treats for you as Harbor Freight released their new brushless compact, or is it more like mid-torque at those power levels? Impact wrench from the Hercules brand this week.
Oh, Hercules, Hercules, Hercules!
So new that our Harbor Freight didn't have them out on the shelves yet. Their new items coming soon section just having some bags on it, and we had to ask them to look for it in the back after showing the item on their webpage. This tool is calling out some serious numbers like 555 breakaway torque though, which isn't quite there, but knocking on the door of the Milwaukee Gen 2 mid-torque that they rate at 550 and 650 nut busting. When you look at their Dying on the Vine cordless earthquake line, you'll notice no brushless impacts there, including the Bauer mid-torque we recently tested. So this is Harbor Freight's first foray into brushless impact wrenches, and its size shows. Looking at this thing, while the store advertises 6 inches and admittedly we measure it at 6.1, in person this looks more like a larger compact than a small mid-torque, especially when next to this 6-inch long Milwaukee. Very similar size in the specs, yet look very different as you'll notice, sort of all in the head. But what makes a mid-torque a mid-torque? Is it torque claims alone, size alone? Well, the brushed Bauer we tested recently is enormously long for a mid-torque, as long as some high torques, but its 450 foot-pound claim puts it smack dab in the middle of mid-torque range. The Craftsman we just tested only advertises 275 foot-pounds, but its 7-inch length and the power it put down certainly qualifies it to take on others in this mid-torque category. At only $99, you can bet that wherever this new impact from Harbor Freight lands, it's certainly going to be on the budget end of things. When we saw specs like 550 breakaway early on, we thought Harbor Freight might be swinging for the fences with this one, bringing us a $140 to $160 latest tech model, but this appears to be targeted a bit differently, at least at first glance, due to the space the new Hercules does live in, and in case the Milwaukee comparison might be, well, maybe a bit unfair, we found another model that's a $99 6.1 inch brushless impact found in a store that lives in between a compact and mid-torque classification, the Kobalt 24 volt 5024B-03. Although this only advertises 150 foot-pounds on the website. That said, the last Kobalt we had on the channel a week or two ago, which is also not from their XTR line, sorry for that confusion, well, that model shot well above its torque claim, and as a matter of fact, this one, before we could even get the box open, is doing something similar. While the website says 150, the box showed up saying 200 foot-pounds. Is that a sign of things to come? We'll have to see, but does that 200 compare directly to Hercules' 555? Not quite. That 555 is of course their breakaway torque, or Harbor Freight's flavor of nut busting. The more important number on this channel is always going to be that max torque, which shows for the Hercules 322 here. Max torque being something there's a real historical accepted best practice for testing. Oddly, something Harbor Freight usually leaves off of their impact wrenches, so happy to see it here. That wasn't the only bit of advertising oddity we saw this week. The Hercules deal Harbor Freight usually runs, where you save $25 when you buy a tool, battery, and charger, was also not working at the register on this new brushless impact. A manager had to input it manually when we saw it was missing, so be on the lookout for that if you run into this. When it comes to that battery, well, of course we'll be using Hercules' 5 amp hour pack, which compares nicely to the XC 5.0 we're using on the M18, and Harbor Freight mentioned this 5.0 in its features as well. This is one of the most cost-effective 5 amp hour batteries you can find, being sold at a retail price of only $65. With that $25 break, that totals $169 for a kit, where the Milwaukee is $219 for the bare tool. But maybe we're talking different ball games here. Let's find out. Our first test is working torque. Here's the Milwaukee taking on the brushed Bauer and the Craftsman up first. .337 foot-pounds, quite a spread among these mid-torques. The Milwaukee is able to pack a lot of bang into only 6 inches. Now for the Kobalt brushless, still 6.1 inch, but sort of smaller overall and cheaper like the Hercules. Let's see it. .148 foot-pounds. Okay, it didn't blow us away like the last Kobalt, but maybe for $99, ain't that bad. Let's see with the all-new brushless Hercules from Harbor Freight on the screen in light blue. 164, okay, about matching the much larger Bauer, but not quite making a dent in our standings here. But some good news, the Hercules does prefer reverse torque, our favorite flavor of torque given the choice. So let's hop into that with the max torque, which is 10 seconds in reverse. Here's the Kobalt taking on M18 Craftsman and Bauer. "200 foot-pounds, not bad when you consider this tool advertises 200 foot-pounds on the box and it's already hit that, but not really mixing it up with the other two that much. Let's see the Hercules put some numbers out in reverse this time. .265, trading blows with the Bauer for a bit, but coming out on top of it, and the Kobalt handedly. But yeah, it's not a DeWalt style SBD made Craftsman, which is an inch longer, or an M18 really, and that's the same length. As soon as we saw it was only $99 and its head size in person, we sort of figured as much. Right about now is usually in our high torque series where we talk about wrist breaking score, which traditionally doesn't quite apply on mid torques and compacts, but on this guy we will mention just how much this thing vibrates. Pretty much more than anything else we've tested in this size range. Basically imagine a cell phone ringing times 50. But onto our best case scenario test to see what number these impacts can ultimately hit. Here's the Kobalt taking on the others. $220, 10% up on its last run. A good effort. Now for the Hercules, let's see it. $294, just barely locked out of those 300s and matching the Bauer here. It seemed to us that really, whether on purpose or not, Harbor Freight made another Bauer mid-torque, but managed to get its length down by about a third from 9 inches to about 6 inches by using a brushless motor. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, considering that Bauer is $120, that's a full 20% more expensive than this. And this tool can fit in some real places now, especially with its narrow head. It makes it enter into the realm of usefulness, to us at least. But let's take a look on our rank chart and see where both of these new impacts land before we make up our minds. For now, both of these are landing on our mid-torque rank list. For the Kobalt, it may not claim to deliver mid-torque levels, but at 6.1 inches long, it's longer than the M18 Gen 2, so it would be hard for us to put a tool that's longer than a current mid-torque on the rank list onto the compact one. Those that do qualify as compact can stay in the under 6 inches only crowd for now. Their power runs are turned into points here. That's 15, 20, and 22 for the Kobalt, 16, 27, and 30 for the Hercules. When it comes to power per inch, both of these are 6.1 inches long, but made different power, so that's 36.1 foot-pounds per inch on the Kobalt and 48.2 on the Hercules. The Kobalt undersold itself on many layers, website saying 150, box saying 200, and making 220 today. Typical Kobalt brushless stuff on this channel. One of the more modest brands for sure. The Hercules, while pointing to the grandstands with their 555, did luckily specify a 322 max torque, although a bit buried in the specs as we expected, and it made 294, or 91% of that. Pretty good stuff in this category. $99 for either of these, that's a pretty damn good bargain if you think about it. $33.3 for the Kobalt and $44.6 for the Hercules. That totals $226.4 for the Kobalt and $256.8 for the Hercules, putting the Hercules in 7th in our mid-torque list under the rigid octane using an octane battery, and the Kobalt in 9th above the Ryobi and Bauer brushed models. We think these places make sense too. The Hercules is a better tool than the Heart. Look at the size difference with similar power. and not as great as the Rigid, which made a full 100 foot-pounds more. And the Kobalt is a better buy than either of these two, but didn't make quite enough power to justify outranking the Heart. Of course, if you do need to fit a tool into a tight space, the Hearts just won't do. So is the new Hercules a good impact wrench for you? Well, sort of depends on your goals there. If you would have looked at the Kobalt at $99 previously, or maybe you own one now and felt, yeah, that's a good deal. This Hercules, assuming it doesn't die soon, we don't really know, is an even better deal. Same price, better performance. So if you weren't willing to point any fingers at Kobalt, you shouldn't begrudge the Hercules too much here. That said, for this price range, there's a glaring omission in our discussion so far, the Brushless Craftsman at $119. It put 100 foot-pounds on the Hercules in almost every single test for an extra 0.9 inches in length. Something we sort of were hoping from this Hercules when you saw it announced, a 6.5 to 6.9 inch, 120, 140, $150 tool that advertises 555 like this one does, but put up more like 340 to 360 on the dyno. That would have been nice. So maybe that's something that with the eventual demise of the cordless Earthquake line, hopefully we'll someday get from Harbor Freight under this Hercules brand, since that's where their brushless efforts seem to be going. So if you already own a Hercules battery, especially a 5 amp hour one, the Hercules is not a lot of money to be wasted here. But if you're looking for a budget impact wrench, take a look at the Craftsman in a link below. We think it's a better all-around impact in almost every way, unless you do need truly something compact, but then there's other much smaller options that are maybe better too. We'll be adding more mid-torques and compacts in the coming weeks and months either way. Click subscribe to not miss that, and thank you for watching.